Reading 26 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll. Cormier-Dugley, April 13th, 1946. The Parable of Walking on the Waters. In a short time we will start the teaching of this work from the beginning. At present, we will continue to speak of this question of sealing oneself. I remind you that the work cannot fall on our ordinary selves and grow and produce results. A person must feel the work as something utterly different from life and all he has learned from life. You can say it is spiritual, not physical, not material, not outside you, as life is. For that reason, it was said that the kingdom of heaven is within you. We spoke about the meaning of within, or inner. As a practical example, it was said that observing eye and the practice of self-observation move the center of gravity of consciousness inward. You begin to see yourself as something outer, acquired. You do not just be yourself. You begin to see a new you. Tonight I wish to refer to the parable of Christ walking on the waters in connection with the idea that we must seal ourselves. We must seal ourselves, sometimes from life and from the way we take life. They are really the same, but not quite. The man, the woman, easily upset, must seal themselves from life, that is, from what upsets them. But this depends whether they can separate from that side which is upset. So it is a sealing of oneself from life and from one's mechanical personality, which later determines for one how one reacts to life, takes life, judges life, and feels one is right or wrong. In my case, I may be able to seal myself from Dr. Nicoll and the way he takes everything. That does not mean that I overcome Dr. Nicoll. It simply means that I have a place, a locked room, a private room where Dr. Nicoll cannot enter. Here the work can grow. After a time, this inner place, gained through self-observation, when it is strong enough, can no doubt overcome Dr. Nicoll. But at first this is impossible. Yet, if I ever get as far as this, a distinction is made, a separation inwardly. I am now two, not one. No one, the work says, can shift himself from where he is unless he divides himself into two, becomes an observing and an observed side. If you have magnetic center, you are in a sense two, but not yet actually. You have the possibility of the work. All growth is by division. One cell divides into two. Man, as a self-developing organism, a cell, must become two first of all. In my case, I and Nicoll must become a very real experience of inner separation. I observe Nicoll doing things, yet am not Nicoll. This is not easy. It is easy to hear, not easy to do. To do what the work teaches is one thing. To hear what it says is another. The second note in the work octave of personal development is, we are told, to apply what the work teaches to ourselves. This is not understood save after long contact with the ideas and a real struggle about the whole matter. The work begins to fight with life in you. People say, for instance, "Oh, the meeting was all about self-observation, and we have heard all that so often." No doubt you have, but have you ever really observed yourself consciously and uncritically and looked at yourself from this absolutely neutral angle where no self-justifying or excuses count? Or are you all the time taking yourself as yourself and thinking it is the only way to take life? In the parable about walking on the waters, we have an idea that exists in different form in the work. Suppose we could always remember ourselves. Then we should be at the third level of consciousness, and all that took place lower down at the second level, where in my case Nicoll exists, the so-called waking state of consciousness, would have no power over me. That is, you would be sealed from your mechanical ways of thinking and feeling and acting and taking life and judging it and so on. So you would, as it were, walk on yourself. Now imagine that you suddenly identify. Then you would sink. Where would you sink? You sink down to the ordinary level of yourself. In my case, to Nicoll, to how you take life, view life, think of life, judge life, as you were taught. That is, as your personality was laid down in you, to what you acquired. Let us quote the parable. Quote, Jesus, therefore, perceiving that they were about to come and take him by force, to make him king, withdrew again into the mountain himself alone. And when evening came, his disciples went down unto the sea, and they entered into a boat, and were going over the sea unto Capernaum. And it was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. And the sea was rising by reason of a great wind that blew. When, therefore, they had rowed about 25 or 30 furlongs, they behold Jesus walking on the sea, and drawing nigh unto the boat, and they were afraid. But he saith unto them, It is I, be not afraid. They were willing therefore to receive him into the boat. And straightway the boat was at the land, whither they were going. John 6. Every parable in the Gospels is about something in this work. Suppose that you have to make some parable about self-remembering, or about false personality, and so on. You would find yourself writing parables just as they are in the Gospels. Let us think what this parable means about Christ walking on the waters. It is more fully explained in one of my chapters on the Gospels, but we can understand to a certain extent what it means now. Notice that Christ was tempted to become a king on earth, and then he went up into a high mountain. What do you think this means? Always understand that Christ was tempted as we are. It would be a great temptation to be made king of the earth. But he went up into a high mountain. Surely that means that he remembered himself, remembered what he had to do, what his task was. Exactly the same idea in different images comes into the next part of the parable. The storm arising at sea represents the storm that arises in us all, let us say, when we get negative, when we identify. Christ, walking on the waters, represents a state of being in which he could walk on all these stormy waters of himself and not sink. The two ideas, going up into the mountain after he was tempted to be king of the earth, and again how he walks on the stormy waters of himself, are similar. They represent the state of self-remembering. And the interesting thing is that when Christ says, "It is I," the Greek construction is very emphatic. Literally, it means, "I am I," which, as you know, is the definition of Jehovah, who said once, "I am that I am." The third state of consciousness, which none of us has attained, except in flashes, is that state in which one remembers oneself. One becomes I above all the other little I's in oneself. So you can see that these illustrations in these parables are about self-remembering, showing how Christ had the complete power of remembering himself, of finding real I in himself, which gave him power over all his life eyes. And this, of course, means that he could seal himself from himself and the effects of life on his human self. Two sides of self-remembering are spoken about in this parable. When Jesus withdrew himself into the mountain, he remembered himself in what we can call a passive way. That is, he withdrew himself from himself and reached a higher state of consciousness in which no further contact existed with his lower eyes. Then we find that the other side of self-remembering is also mentioned. He went down into the stormy sea and walked on it. One of the greatest teachings of this work is that we are not properly conscious, and that we cannot do anything with ourselves in a real way until we begin to reach the higher level of consciousness called self-remembering, self-consciousness, self-awareness. You will remember that I spoke to you all about this recently when I said that the driver has to climb up to a higher level. Otherwise, he cannot drive his horse and carriage. The practice of self-remembering is possibly not so difficult as you think. It is arising above one's stormy seas, above one's personality, jealousies, envies, anxieties, cares, and all the rest. Many times it has been said to you that unless you believe that there is a higher level, both in yourself and in the categories of mankind, a conscious circle of men, you will not be able to remember yourself. If you have magnetic center in you, you have always known in a strange way that there is something higher. But magnetic center by itself can only lead you to the work and cannot keep you in it. If you hear the work with your mind and not with your external ears, you begin to see what it is about. You begin to find in yourself endless verifications. Through the power of the work, taking the place of magnetic center, you can begin to remember yourself. But if you take life as itself, you will sink. Once a difficulty arises in life and you feel yourself badly treated, you will identify with all the small I's in yourself that have been formed in you by your upbringing. So you will fall down, you will sink into the waters of your own personality, and then you will forget yourself and become just an ordinary mechanical man serving nature. Merely to try to remember oneself by withdrawal, by going up into the mountain, is not enough. This will certainly give you an idea of what you have to do, what your real aim is. But then, having heard with your inner mind what you have to do, you will have to go out into life and walk on the waters and not sink. But let me repeat, as long as you take yourself as yourself, you will never get anywhere in this work. If you cannot observe yourself, you cannot shift from where you are.